G'day and welcome to the Roar Rugby Podcast. I'm Christy, Doran, and joining me as always, Matt Tamua. We're going to be having Darren Coleman, the former Waratahs coach, join the podcast in just a little bit. But before then, we're going to dip our toes into where went wrong for the Wallabies on the weekend. And it's not just the Wallabies that are looking at what went wrong. Our friends, our cousins across the ditch, of course, the All Blacks reflecting on a 38-30 loss to Argentina. Such a turnaround from last year's World Cup semi-final. So a lot to dissect on this, the Roar Rugby Podcast. Hey, Matt. I was thinking just over the weekend on Saturday afternoon at about 4 o'clock, what was worse, the Wallabies or Raygun's performance at the Olympics?
Raygun was inspiring, though. There's a bigger crowd. I was obsessed with it. I think I messaged you. I was absolutely obsessed with it. I was watching everything, all the memes and the comparisons of our Eric the Eel moment and all of this kind of stuff. Oh God, I thought it was brilliant. But it's a little bit sad that the Olympics is finished now.
It is. But, you know, we've got Tom Cruise to look forward to, 4 more years of promos around him. I couldn't believe the person that was singing the song at the time and playing the guitar didn't bring out the Mission Impossible theme song when Tom Cruise goes from the top of the Stade de France down to take the flag and go away on the motorbike all the way to LA. Can't believe how quickly that transition was. But, yeah, it is sad that the Olympics is gone. Thankfully, those reels are going to last for a long, long time, though.
Oh, they will. And I think Raygun's going to be an absolute superstar when she comes back. I saw some people saying, oh, it's a bit harsh or whatever. But I think, yeah, she's infamous, isn't she? Like, she's just – I've seen some – I don't know, you might have seen it, the clips of her in the closing ceremony and everyone's getting around her. And, oh, God, I love it. It's good fun.
I just wonder whether or not it dawned on her the next morning that, hey, I've got to lean into this. And if I lean into it, then I'll come out and I'll have speaking gigs and other publicity gigs for a long, long time, because she's already got more than 50,000 Instagram followers. And that's about 10 times more than what she had 3 or 4 days ago. So you can just imagine that that's going to skyrocket. But it was pretty incredible.
Yeah, if she can take a leaf out of Stephen Bradbury's book, that rather than fight it, just take it. I think she'll very much be Raygun will be a verb in no time. So it'll be good.
It's probably one of the words that will find its way into like the dictionaries at the end. Like, what was the word of 2024? Raygun. I know that it's it's a noun.
It'll be a verb. I'm telling you, Raygun will be a verb very soon. I don't know. Yeah, I can predict it.
Well, what we probably also could predict was the fact that the Springboks were going to beat the Wallabies. I don't think there was anyone that really thought that the Wallabies were going to come too close. Brisbane, dry track, really no excuses. They'd been match hardened off the back of 2 matches against Ireland where they split the chocolates there. But they were impressive without being outstanding. They probably left a few points out there. But I text you pre-game and going, what do you think? Do you think it'll be the Wallabies? Can they get close? And you shot back. I don't think so. And I think you put a 4 in front of their scoreline.
I did. And, I'm obviously going for the Wallabies and hoping it works out well. But just, and look, it wasn't misfound. It wasn't unfounded kind of sense of pessimism in a way. Was it like in the Bristoria or whatever? What are they calling it? Broberg, Bristoria, Brisbane. It seemed a lot of green out there.
Brisberg,
Brisberg, Pretoria. But yeah, look, it was. On that side, it was really cool to see a full crowd, wasn't it? It was, and I think I've said it before that the South Africans really are at the peak of their powers, and you could see that a lot of people wanted to go and witness one of the greater teams, and you could very much see that. And I agree. I didn't think they were amazing. And look, maybe in the past, them being off a couple percent, we've been good enough to take over and maybe win the game, particularly in Brisbane. And I reckon we saw a little bit of that again. They were just a little bit off, but unfortunately 2% off that Springboks team is still very, very hard to beat.
But before we get into the nitty and gritty, I was with my colleague Tony Harper, and we'd walk down Clarkson, and you're soaking up some of the atmosphere. And as a player, you probably don't really ever get to experience that. But a couple of things stood out to me. One was immediately how many green jerseys there were right the way through the CBD of Brisbane, and it's such a great walk because, much like the Allianz Stadium, you can walk there and you can soak up the suburban lifestyle. Of Brisbane, much like Allianz and the MCG, and that's why I love games that are there rather than the Olympic Park in the west of Sydney. But I just thought that a couple of things really stood out. One, I thought that the Wallabies should have lent in to this and gone, you know what, this last kilometre or last 500 metres, let's all walk in there together, soak up, rather than get the bus underneath. Daytime footy, it was nice weather. I just thought this was an opportunity when you're expected to lose and you end up ultimately losing, soak up that atmosphere, fire up a little bit, because what I saw at the national anthems was unsurprisingly chalk and cheese. You've got the Wallabies in one line, and yes, the crowd was probably a little bit louder because there was more Aussies, I think, than South Africans. But Nick Frost is taking the second row to a new meaning. He's standing behind every other player in that Wallabies side, which was just odd. And there's a couple of centimetres, a bit of space, a bit of air time between all of them. And then you look at the box and they're all 23, shoulder to shoulder, arms around. Sia Khaleesi singing so that his friends can hear him back in the Republic. And I just thought immediately they looked a little bit off. And maybe it was intimidation. Maybe it was they were thought they were to lose, but the accuracy wasn't there, was it? The set piece struggled from the outset. The first scrum in the first couple of minutes, they got pushed right backwards, and there was a penalty there. And I just thought those little things that they could have done to fire up, they missed.
Yeah, look, I think in terms of the entry to the game, it was a few years ago. I remember when Michael Checker started trying to replicate what happens at Twickenham, essentially. So you kind of go through a big crowd, and maybe more from giving more back to fans. I think it actually is better for the fans as well. In terms of the players, look, I don't know. It's one of those little bit low hanging fruit in the sense that if we win, we go, oh, look, they were so calm and relaxed before the game, and so I do struggle. I don't know how I feel with these kind of things. I do know that an Australian public want to get behind a team that is passionate and emotional and care, and South Africans would have been very proud to see Sia Khaleesi sing his anthem in all three languages at the top of his lungs. So. I don't think it's look. I think Joe and Laurie and Cronny probably have a few other things that they're addressing at the moment, and rightfully so. Look, I remember one of the issues we used to get was you guys aren't ready for the All Blacks. Like when they're doing their haka, you've got your tracksuits on, so you're not even warm, and then we take them off, and then it's like, oh, you've got to not play the All Blacks as soon as they do the haka. Like you need a bit of a break. So like the kind of things that you probably analyze when, look, realistically, we were beaten. We weren't accurate enough discipline wise. And that was probably one of the more disappointing things. And then set piece. So yeah, look, it was frustrating because we're kicking so much, but if you're going to have a strong kicking game, often if you kick a lot, it kind of evens up the scoreline or narrows the gap a little bit, but our set piece just wasn't good enough. And that cost us.
Yeah, and particularly the first 20 minutes, because at one point in time, you go right the way towards the 60-minute mark, and I think the Wallabies had given away 12 penalties at that point in time. So only 3 in the last 20 minutes. I think it was clearly South Africa had 3 yellow cards towards the back end of the game as well, which started to even it out to a 15-12 penalty count. But in the first 20, you see Jake Gordon, Noel Olasio, their kicking game struggled. They've got some territory behind them at last, and they kick it away either first or second phase, and it backfires when you don't make a contestable kick, and it just relieves all the pressure. But you saw players so excited about trying to win the breakdown, and particularly the attacking breakdown, but they went off their feet, and you could see Carlo Tizzano do it. You saw Noel Olasio blowing up, going like, "How are we getting these basics wrong?" But the first 20 minutes, even a couple of infringements around the rolling maul. You saw Alan Alatoa pinged for going on the wrong side of the ruck as well. So it just allowed South Africa to really get their tails up early on, didn't it?
Yeah, it's a hard one as well, because for us to win that game or be a threat, you've got to push the letter of the law, and unfortunately, that's not kind of without danger, and you get penalised. So yeah, if you do acknowledge that they have a good jackal threat, particularly with Khaleesi and Creel, and when Malcolm Marks comes on, they've got some really good on-ballers. You got to get to the ball early, and then you lose your feet. And so it is, it's one of the reasons we love the game. It's not so simple. It's very much you got to invest in one area. Like I said, for the thing that frustrated me was we clearly were going to a kicking game, but the execution was just nowhere near where it needed to be. That glaring one in the middle of the field, which I found quite interesting actually. Both teams used this little second phase kickoff 9 because teams are doing the 2 fullback system and closing early, so it's down the middle. So tactically, you could see where both teams were thinking. It's just the execution was night and day, and so that was probably the frustrating thing. And then the set piece, once again, if you're going to be kicking and playing territory, you need to be able to have a strong set piece, but that's probably where we were lacking.
How good was the innovation of South Africa, though? We saw it early, South Africa with the line out, with the double lifters. Later on, we saw Cheslin Colby feeding the scrum. He was there with the throwing of the line out as well when both hookers were off, with Marks yellow carded. They are taking that to a new level, aren't they?
Oh, it's great. I think I've said it many times. I'm loving tactically where he's going at the moment, Rassie. I think it's very much a ploy to go back to a 7-1 bench and have Cheslin as a genuine option at halfback. You've seen him. Oh gosh, he's some player. Like he dominates guys in defence. He pops up and you see this little guy with his headgear, and then he's passing at halfback, and he moved into halfback a fair bit in that game as well. So they're a really interesting team. They've got their base. They've got their base cemented in that sense, and they can start being a bit tricky. I don't think we're anywhere near that, unfortunately, at the moment. But it as a pure rugby fan, it's so exciting to see because traditionally, to be fair, the South Africans have been known for quite conservative, and boring type play. But one would have to admire what they're doing, and it is good to see.
Well, you saw Eddie innovate 25 years ago, and he's still trying to innovate. But I think this is the innovation that you can see that's taking the game to a new level. Had you seen the double lifter jump used like South Africa did twice? Because Joe Schmidt said that they were expecting that. So I was a bit surprised. Like, I've watched a fair bit of South Africa, and I missed the second half of one of their tests against Ireland. But what they were doing there was intriguing.
Yeah, it is, and it's once again the danger is that transfer isn't correct or isn't accurate, and then you essentially give up a 5 meter more. But it was executed perfectly to plan, and I thought that was cool. I don't know if you look back on the Super Sport that we were talking about a little while ago, the documentary Rising the Sun or Sun's Rise. Yeah. And you see them that they've got this. They have this session before a test match, like the week before in Japan, and you had the forwards literally with a case of beer in their hotel in the hotel conference center talking about a move that they're going to do in the malls, and they were just like spitballing, throwing out ideas, and like really challenging the way you think about things. And they seriously had a case of beers there, and they were just kind of having a think. And yeah, it's a well-oiled team. It's a well-prepared team, and they would have known that everyone identifies South Africa as a great mauling threat, so they're going to throw guys into that maul. So if we can transfer the point of pressure to the front, very risky, but God, perfected and executed really well.
It's Chasing the Sun, the name, the title we're just looking for there. But, even the introduction of Tony Brown, and I know that we've touched upon it, but Joe Schmidt's spoken a fair bit about it in the last week. But Tony Brown, one of the great innovators of attack play as well. We saw it with the Highlanders and then with Japan, and now we're going to see it with South Africa. So undoubtedly they're going to take their attacking threat to a new and greater height. Encourage you to have a read of Stuart Barnes' copy on Cheslin Colby about revolutionising his play as a winger, to be able to even jump in the first 5 at times. So I know that he missed that cheeky field goal attempt, but he was standing there prepared for it. Much to chew over there. What about the Wallabies? Because we'll come to New Zealand and Argentina later on, but South Africa's picked a third of their squad from overseas. So 11 of their 33 is playing outside of South Africa. And it seems like 1 or 2 players have recently returned to the Republic as well, which is great for their own domestic game as well, that they can see these stars on a daily and a weekly basis in the URC. But South Africa looks like they've taken their game to a greater height since leaving Super Rugby. Australia and New Zealand, on the other hand, seem like they're perhaps stumbling backwards as well. And there seems, at least publicly, that Joe Schmidt does not want to pick from overseas. Only Marika Koroibete called up into that Wallabies side. It looks like he'll probably play this weekend off the back of Filippo Daunguna's injury. But to only have 1 of your 36 from overseas, given that another 10 or so players either left to join foreign leagues or indeed the NRL back home, it seems like we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah, we're one arm tied behind our back in a fight. It just seems a bit odd. It is frustrating. The game's hard enough as it is. I do understand there's a lot at play. I've made it very clear where I stand on this issue. I do wonder with New Zealand. I wonder with New Zealand if them reaching the World Cup final last year has glossed over a few issues, a little bit like what happened with us in 2015. 2016, we're like, no, all is well, it's good, we don't need to change anything, blah, 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 blah. And then, because we kind of had that little uplift, I do wonder if the Kiwis are a little bit the same. I wonder if the tide is starting to turn. The teams that won on the weekend pick heavily from overseas, almost exclusively. Yes, it's not, apples v apples by any sense of the imagination, but I think we're just dying a slow death a little bit. We're just making it harder and harder for ourselves, particularly in the tight 5. When you could have seen, we would have really benefited from some old heads in those scrums or in those defending those mauls or things like that. So, tough. No, I've made it very clear where I stand on the issue, and I think it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and it's interesting from a couple of perspectives and levels, because Argentina were part of Super Rugby for a while. Then that, of course, got blown up with the onset of COVID, and similarly South Africa's involvement in Super Rugby too. But Argentina really, this is a side that has won against New Zealand in 2022 as well. Australia hasn't won in New Zealand since 2001, I think it is. So it's a long time between drinks for Australia, who get to play there every year, a couple of times a year at stages as well. And yes, they've gone close on a couple of occasions, but for Argentina and the Los Pumas to do that twice in 3 years is incredible. Their first win over New Zealand was in 2020. So, I think you're scratching your head. We'll talk more about New Zealand later on. But looking at Australia and their problems, they've just lost now Jeremy Williams to concussion for the weekend. Similarly, Nick Frost, who we saw his eye really close off there after a knock. Filippo Daunguna with the broken leg. Whether or not Taniela Tupou features remains to be seen. But at the moment, he's in Tonga off the back of his late father's death. That's a lot of players to withdraw in the space of a week. And when I look at this Wallaby squad, I just see only a couple of guys over the age of 30, and that's really right across the board. It doesn't seem like it has the hardness, the starch there. Like you think about Isaac Kaleo is really only in his first season of full Super Rugby, where he was a starter on most of the year. And you look at Zane Nongo, only a test footy player from last year, and maybe shouldn't have even gone to the World Cup. Probably wouldn't have if there wasn't an injury to Alan Alatoa. right across the board, there's youth, and I compare like a Jeremy Williams, who's a really good, promising player on the rise, but he's where Ned Hannigan was when he was, back in 2017. Now Ned Hannigan, who's in his late 20s, goes to France when this is probably a time when you should be drawing on that hardness and the Lockie Swinton's hardness. And I'm interested, what do you think about guys like Liam Gill? You've seen them in Japan. He's just recently moved to the Black Rams, I think it is as well. So he's a guy who's still in his early 30s, who I remember Freddie Michalak, who played alongside Liam at Lyon for a long, long time, thought, why isn't this guy playing for the Wallabies? He's an amazing player.
Yeah, it is, you're spot on. Unfortunately, the way Australian rugby works is we build guys up when they're really young, because we are looking for the new shiny toy in our quest to be relevant in the Australian sporting landscape. And then once they go through growing pains, which every player should be allowed some grace period in that sense, we get rid of them. We absolutely ruin guys like Ned Hannigan or whatever, and guys who we're expecting way too much out of them at 21, at 22. Like 6 years later, they're fine. If anything, they're in their prime, but mentally, they've dealt with pressure, they've dealt with the ups and downs. But look, we can't keep a lot of the guys because we just can't compete with that kind of financial stuff. But yeah, wouldn't it be great to bring back Lockie Swinton and all these guys? And yes, they've given away yellow cards, red cards at times, but once again, no one's perfect. We've got to see some. I think we need to allow guys some little bit of grace in a little way, because you don't build this overnight. The South African team, perfect example. That these guys were, 5 years ago, one of them losing to Italy, and then we're giving them time. I think Sia's my age. He's well and truly, he's well on in terms of playing. But we don't have many of those kind of guys, particularly in leadership positions at the moment, which makes it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, and I just look at guys like Scott CEO, and I know that Angus Scott Young, he's not someone that necessarily set the world alight when he was playing Super Rugby, but he's kicked on him. He's now in his late 20s, and they're the sorts of players that when you get injuries, it just helps the hardness, it helps with the depth, and it helps with the life experience that you lived, because you're in your late 20s, early 30s, as opposed to your early 20s, and just really getting to understand what professional rugby is all about. What about the 10s and the 9s? This week, what would you do? Because I'll see a lot more pressure, 21 tests. He's still yet to convince anyone that he's the person to lead the Wallabies long term. But it seems to me like you're going to break Noel Olasero's confidence if you were to remove him from the setup so soon after his recall. He barely played against Georgia in that third match, which was almost a month ago. So it was about 3-4 weeks really between proper hit-outs. What would you be doing around the halves this week, knowing that Ben Donaldson was left out, confidence issues, Joe not quite happy with where he's at from a precision perspective, and then Tom Liner, 21-year-old who's only played in 2 seasons of professional rugby, has battled a couple of hamstring injuries throughout the year. And if I think about another game where one of his sides struggled physically against the Chiefs back in the quarterfinals, he wasn't able to stem the tide either and managed to turn the Reds around. So where do you think Joe moves, and what do you think he should be doing over the next few weeks with his halves?
Yeah, I don't think he should be moving, quite frankly. We need to stick with these guys, and Tom Wright as well. He by no means was overly convincing on the weekend as well. But once again, there needs to be a little bit of grace with this. There's a lot of pressure on these guys touching the ball at very crucial positions, and if they're lacking a little bit of confidence because they sense there's some lack of belief from their coaches, it's really going to plague them. And look, if we were in a position like a South Africa, where we had 4 guys that we could choose from, then you'd cut and you'd run and you'd get a new one. But we're not in that position. It requires a different kind of method here. So I really hope Jake Gordon stays, gets another go. I really hope Noah stays and gets another few goes, to be honest with you, because I tell you what's not going to help is if we ruin his confidence, then we throw Timeliner in against the world champions, and then we ruin his confidence, and then we've got 2 turns with like, it is difficult. It's really, really hard, and we are not in that privileged position of 5 options in one position. It just it's not the enviable position that we have.
Yeah, and I did some stats around this. Since Noah Matty's debut against the All Blacks in 2020, he's featured in 21 of the 45 tests. So that's less than half the tests since he made his debut in the number 10 jersey. And throughout that time, it's more often than not that he's out of the 23 rather than being shifted back to the bench as well, which I think is an issue with the 10s full stop. You can do so much learning and growing, I imagine, coming off the bench. Can you just tell us about your experiences of when you've been in and out of the side and how you found that?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Like, going from starting to bench, at least you feel like there's a little bit of progression. Whereas when you go starting to not in the team, particularly as a young 10 or as a young inside back, is very much hard to connect the next time you play, because you're trying to right the wrongs and all that kind of stuff. Whereas at least when you're on the bench, you get time to develop a little bit. For me, I got dropped after the first couple games, and then I actually started to learn to play 12 from the bench, and then probably made that more my favoured position by the end. So, look, I think the squad's in a different place, though. We don't have a Reece Hodge who can be on the bench and cover all positions. We don't have that. I guess Ben Donaldson is the guy that you might say, he's your 10-15 cover, but we don't have a Reece Hodge. So at least from a continuity standpoint, if Noah does get dropped, he will hopefully get some more time. But I think we're a few weeks off that.
All right, let's change tack just for a little while, and we'll bring in a person very familiar to Australian rugby audiences, the former Waratahs head coach, Darren Coleman, a man that coached Matt Tamua way back in the day when he was coming through the ranks, but a person that's actually just about to return into the club rugby system as the new director of rugby for Hunter, and that is Darren Coleman. DC, good to have you on the pod.
Thanks, boys. Yeah, thanks for having me along. Good to be here.
There's a bit of a long blurb there, but you guys don't really need too many introductions.
No. I knew him when he was a pup. Now he's old, broken down, old greyhound.
Very broken and very overweight, but it was a good old time. It's pretty cool when you get to do that. Like, I know DC was kind of starting his professional coaching career at a similar time, and yeah, it's nice when you see you get to chase people's careers and all that.
Yeah, agree.
DC, congratulations. I know that there was a few Shoot Shield clubs that were interested in you, but Hunter, tell us about the role.
Yeah, mate, it's good to get back on the horse. Yeah, I took a little bit of time, a little bit through wanting to make a good decision, and two, trying to find a job that would suit. And as you know, like the professional coaching market in Australia is pretty limited. I just had 3 good years and enjoyed it. Obviously got bucked off a bit in the last year, but there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity for me immediately in Super Rugby again. So not keen on overseas. I've done that. I've done probably 10 or 12 years. And I'm not saying I'd never go overseas, but just with my family and the opportunities that arose there, none of it really sort of lit the fire to want to uproot the family and head overseas. So then it was what's around in Australia, and then obviously below Super Rugby, the next level is Shoot Shield. So obviously been in it a lot. I think I've coached 8 or 9 years at different places in Shoot Shield and played in it, and I know the league well. And Hunter turned out to be the best opportunity for me. It's come up here, join my brother. My brother's he's done all the hard yards. He's done 4 years here, and it's been tough going for him. Hopefully I can work with him. They've got a progressive board. They're aspirational, and I'm excited to restart and hopefully reboot and have some success here and maybe get back in the shop window of fully professional rugby down the track.
It's been a little bit of a shining light though, the club game in particular, the Shoot Shield, DC. Do you look forward to kind of going back where there's a little bit more sense of optimism about the game?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, like as I said, I cut my teeth here and I've spent a lot of time in it. Yeah, I don't know. Like a lot of people say, grassroots is thriving and the professional game sucks. And at different times, I don't know if I contrive to that. People are just happy in their own little world at different places. But there's a lot of goodwill in Shoot Shield. It's genuine passion, and it's a good quality of footy. Like for me, it's yes, I want to coach at the highest level I can, but also I want to be stimulated. I want to have a level of rugby that you got committed players, you can design things, you can plan, and Shoot Shield does that for me. And it's actually a full circle. Like my first serious rugby club was here at the Hunter Wildfires back in 1995. I was a 20-year-old coming out of my small little town at Southwest Rocks and got to play for them. I was a country boy, so this was where we came and got to play against internationals back then in the Shoot Shield. And took me around the world, and now I'm sort of back here wanting to put back into this area. There's Newcastle's a really strong football city, like both league, more so league, but also union. And I want to set up something where country boys around New South Wales, particularly the north half of the state, it's a big move to go to Sydney. Like, yeah, it's expensive. I've seen so many kids over my time go to Sydney to try and crack it in footy and get spat out. Cost of living, football being tough, whatever it may be, homesickness. So I find Newcastle's a good little happy medium. It was great for me. It was a springboard onto the bigger cities from here. So in a long-winded answer, mate, I think there's some personal aspirations for me to get my career back going, but also there's a good opportunity to give back and help it at different levels of the game, and hopefully find some guys like me that are aspirational and want to rip in. And then the third part of it is I get to work with my brother, and we're best mates. We've been best mates our whole life. We've always wanted to coach together at some stage. So this brings it all together.
How do you reflect on the last couple of months, Darren, since your time with the Waratahs came to the end in the quarterfinal stage? And have you managed to find peace with how the 3 years went?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't think I'm fully healed, mate. Like, there was. I definitely got bucked off pretty bad there. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm an eternal optimist. With 5 or 6 weeks to go, I still had plans of us winning 4 or 5 of those games and making the playoffs, and me keeping my job and being able to rebuild from there. I definitely know what I got wrong. Like we've had a really thorough review process. I've spoken to a lot of people. I definitely feel certain aspects of my game I've improved, and then towards the end, some of them I probably lost a bit of confidence and didn't back myself enough. I probably look at the analogy a bit that I fell on a sword at the end, but did I fall on my sword? I did things. I molded my coaching as I went through the 3 years at the Tars, and did that make me a better coach? It definitely did, but did I go away from some of the things that made me unique and made me who I am and got the success I'd had leading into that gig and at the start of that gig? So I'm coming to it peace. I think I said it all before. I was embarrassed. Like I read a few of your articles. I read articles, and when they go Waratahs at rock bottom and all that sort of stuff, it hurts, because I felt I took it over at rock bottom and got it moving, and then probably left it back there. So on the ladder wise. So yeah, there's a bit of embarrassment. There's a bit of pain with it. But I need to get back on the horse now. I'm now thinking about footy. The San Diego stint was good for me. I didn't have to worry about talking to players or agents. I just helped the coach out with some things I've seen. Now I'm just had my first full day of work here in Newcastle. We're planning on who we're recruiting. We're planning on getting staff together. I know what makes me unique and different as a coach. I'm going to stick to those strengths, and I can't wait to get back into it.
DC, you said, and it's interesting actually, we've been speaking about before you jumped on about having a bit of grace period, particularly for players and playmakers. I'm interested to see what you think with regards to coaching. You and I were around when Andy Friend was there, and then kind of, we lost him to our shores quite quickly. And you saying that you feel like you've learnt, from the last few years, yet, the next step isn't as logical. Do you think we need to have that same kind of grace period with coaches, or we need to find a way to keep our coaches in and develop?
Yeah, you can get spat out. And interestingly, I'm really fortunate. Friend is a good friend. I've become great mates with Anthony Seabolt over the last 24 months, and Michael Maguire's a great mate of mine, and all three of them have had horrific, way more dramatic than me, sackings that played out in the media. So they were three guys I really bounced off. Their advice was take a little bit longer out of the game than I did. They said, Siebes, if you remember, went and did the England rugby stint. Madge went and worked with NRL referees. Friendy rode a bike from the top of Australia to the bottom. And I would have done that. Like I was looking and hoping to get a job in coach education for a year, just to reset a little bit longer. But there was nothing really going, to be honest, pup. Like, and in the end, Sydney Mortgages, I had to work, and I didn't want to work in another field. Like, footy's what I do, and it's all I've ever done. So yeah, I probably got back. I'm back in it a little sooner than I was originally planning, and a little bit of that is just by what happened. But I don't know. You get told, like, there was a lot of goodwill towards me when I got the chop, and RA and all that were around. Yeah, we want to keep you in the system, and I've had good conversations with them. I don't think the door's closed. There's just no jobs. Like, there's just no other jobs. Like the next job may be coming up of any sort of note. It may be Australian 20s when Gracie moves on, and that could be 3, that could be 6 months. And unfortunately, I just can't afford to be out of work for 6 months. Like, I gotta feed kids and pay mortgages. So I'm back in, and I've found a job that I'm passionate about. And the one I've found now is, if you know how well you follow Shoot Shield, but Wildfire's at 10th. I finished 10th this year, and that suits me perfectly. Like, I love I went to the Rats, I went to Gordon, started up LA, Wildfire, Waratahs were last when I jumped in. I really enjoy going to gigs where people say they're not expecting you to have success. They write you off. And I love going to joints that haven't done it before. Like, I'd love, over the course of my time here, to be able to bring the first ever Shoot Shield back to Newcastle, and I'll be busting chops for that. But it'll take a while.
TC, just before we let you go, because I know you've got to duck off in a second, the humility that you've always shown has always been something that a lot of people have always resonated and respected you with. And I think that comes through with all your responses, right the way from your first presser, but your last at Waratahs HQ, and certainly now. But before we go, what do you think about the age profile issue in Australian rugby at the moment? Because we're talking about the fact that a lot of the older guys end up going overseas, and we don't pick them for the Wallabies now. And the Waratahs also had probably a bit of a victim of that. They were a young squad with young 10s at least, but up front certainly young too. Is that one of the issues in Australian rugby at the moment? Do you find that these youngsters are learning some harsh lessons on the toughest stages, but there's not too many other options elsewhere?
No, there's no doubt. I believe we need another tier of higher level footy to getting close to the Super Rugby in between. That model obviously takes a while it's proved troublesome to find it. Even now, I just went through my list of players for next year here at this club, and you get guys that hit, and it's probably no different, guys that hit 20. Every player that's of decent level wants to be a pro. They want to be a pro somewhere. So in Shoot Shield, you find they come and they give it a crack. They don't get picked up by a super team. Then it's, okay, where's the next league? Is it Spain? Is it MLR? Where can I go and be a professional? Then it hits 26, 27, 28, and they go, I need to start thinking financially responsibly and put my career ahead of playing rugby. So I think it's not too dissimilar in the professional game. Like, guys get to 25, 26, they've played a bit of super, they don't feel they're on the radar for the national team, so they'll go abroad and try and make more money, and also not just the money aspect, like the life experience of getting to play rugby around the world. I've been a beneficiary of that. It's awesome. I never begrudge people doing there, but yeah, there's no doubt we've got to find a way to keep. You look at the other top international teams, the Leinsters, the Toulouse, like their age profile will be way higher than a Super Rugby team. I don't have the answer in how we keep them here, but yeah, you've only got to look at it and look at some players. Like, you speak to any player, they know the game better at 30 than they do at 20. It's just natural.
We could talk a lot longer about all of those subjects. DC, really nice to talk to you. Great that you're back involved in rugby and looking forward to having you on again soon, and all the best.
No, I appreciate that. And if you're an ex-Novocastrian or you're a Sydney boy that's sick of the cost of living, the Hunter in Newcastle particularly has got some great beaches, good things up here. So get in touch with me and I'll hook you up and get on those wildfires. Look out, we're coming.
Love it, mate. Thanks a lot.
Good on you, lads. Have a good one.
Hey, Matt, awesome to have JC on. And where do you reckon he got that nickname?
He stole my joke. I think he thought he was like Dan Carter, but I'm still not sure where Dan Carter got his nickname from. So, good to have him on. He's a great man. Glad he's not lost to Australian rugby. I know sometimes we think because they're not in coaching super teams, they're lost or whatever, but he'll be doing sharing many a story and passing on a lot of knowledge up there. So, it's good.
Well, he's met a lot of people, and I think even about Brad Thorne. 12 months ago, he was a guy that was probably chewed up and spat out, and people wondering what he's doing. Well, he was actually offered a forwards coaching gig at another Super Rugby franchise for next season. He's turned it down to concentrate on his family. But hopefully these sorts of people will continue to be involved in the game. I know that Brad's done stuff with schoolboy rugby recently, and I'm not sure if he'll continue that, but awesome that Darren is involved in Shoot Shield once again, because he's got a lot to give. No doubt about that. All right, the All Blacks, 38-30. Are you surprised by that?
Massively. I actually watched the first half in a bit, and then I turned it off. I was like, oh, yeah, this will, they'll continue to win and whatever. And then the last few minutes, I checked my phone, and I couldn't believe it, so I rushed back and watched it. So I had to watch a replay later. But, so surprised. I just didn't. You don't really know what to think with Argentina a lot of the time because we don't see a lot of them. I don't even think they have a professional, provincial team in the country at the moment. So it's amazing for World Rugby. It's glaring that these teams can win it, or they can win in New Zealand twice, as you mentioned earlier, and we've been struggling since the 80s or something. So fair play.
I'll tell you who I just feel so happy for. 39-year-old Augustin Cree, who's the heart and soul of the Los Pumas, scores the match-winning try under the sticks, basically. Like, what a story he is. Yeah,
and look, we're tied up nicely. We just talked to DC about 39 here. You're more chance of being a coach than scoring a winning try, and it's great. It's good to see, and as predictable as the what was so predictable was the tears afterwards. Don't you love it? You just see them all in tears, and it's so good having the RGs playing well.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I'm not surprised that you thought it was going to be one-way traffic, because after Argentina started so sprightly, it was 10-0 up to New Zealand, and you thought, well, not many sides ever run down the All Blacks if they score the first try and they're 10-0 up, and then not long later, Mackenzie 13-5. But Argentina, they just managed to stay in the contest, didn't they? And that's probably a side that can take their chances is going to push someone. And in the end, that pressure started to tell. And I touched upon this in a 5 things story that I wrote this afternoon on Monday, and we're recording this. But there's almost been 2 kind of periods of the All Blacks. The great All Blacks of 2015 that retired, and you saw McCaw and Dan Carter, Jerome Kino, those sorts of players finish up, Nono, from an international perspective. And then they had such a massive factory of players ready who have been starved of opportunities that finally got their opportunity in 2016. And one of those is Beauden Barrett, who takes the 10 jersey from DC. Had been on the bench. He's 2-time World Rate Player of the Year in the next couple of years. But I always thought that at the back of 23, when you're losing Aaron Smith, Brodie Retallick, Sam Whitelock, Dane Coles, that there was going to be a bit of a drop-off. And I think we're starting just to see that it's hard to replace these legends of the game. And they've now pretty much lost the majority of that 2015 class, the last side to win that World Cup. And I just thought that if this was ever going to be a chance to win back the Bledisloe, it should have been about now. Australia should have been targeting, I think, a few years ago, how do we get in the best possible shape come 24, 25, 26, 27, not just to target a Lions series, but a Bledisloe, because those legends of the game were going to retire for the All Blacks at some point in time, and it's proving hard to replace them.
Yeah, that requires a level of foresight that we're not typically known for in Australian rugby, unfortunately. But they are. It was actually interesting when I was in Japan. I was playing with a couple of Kiwi guys there, and they were speaking very much about similar issues that we were just speaking to DC about, where guys at 25, 24, hadn't, and they were kind of going overseas. And with the game just being, money exploding overseas. Yeah, you do wonder if New Zealand is feeling that or feeling it to an extent. I don't think it's anywhere near, and look, they've lost 1 game. It's not by any means the end of the world. It's just, from what we've come to expect from New Zealand, which is winning at home. You start going, maybe there are a few little signs creeping in there. And it's, look, I was an All Blacks fan for a lot of my early age career, so early, years, and I always like seeing them do well. So, it is interesting. I do think, like I said before, I do wonder if last year's World Cup final papered over a few cracks that maybe we'll start to see in the next couple of years. One thing I do know is that they produce the best coaches and the best players in the world, and getting their structures right will probably be the next part of the equation, very much like what Russie did in 2018, 2017, when he changed the structures first and then kind of did that. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing that from a New Zealand side of things now, because, other teams are catching up. Teams are stealing their players and their coaches. So it's a different proposition now.
It wouldn't surprise me if someone like a Sammy Penny-Finau returns. I just thought that looking at the shape and the balance of that squad, there was 3 pretty hard-on ballers there with Dalton Papali'i, Ethan Blackadder, and Artie Sevilla, similar shapes and sizes. If you get a Finau, it's a bit more of that intimidation, that physicality that you've looked at the All Black sides of the past when they've had guys like Kino there, and you thought, they put fear in your eyes. But, they took their chances, Argentina. Well played to them. A few more line-out issues. Asafa Umua struggling there in the last 15, not just being able to hit his target, and that's something that we're so familiar with from an Australian perspective. Good to chew the fat here, another pod. I don't see Argentina beating New Zealand twice in a row. I do see South Africa being too strong in Perth. The crowd was 50-50 in Brisbane. It could be even more a 60-40 split in Perth. We know how many South Africans there are over there.
Yeah, Perthoria, as they call it. And look, I really do think the South Africans will actually play better. And I think we've got a few injury concerns and things like that. So it could be a tough time. I would like to see, like I said, I really hope we do stick with a bit of the selection, and we actually, they're going to be tough times, but finding moments, finding that self-belief or whatever it is that we need. The Argies don't win that game in Wellington down by 10 points if they don't have an element of self-belief. And I think for us, we just, hopefully we can build some consistency, get some sort of belief out of there from knowing, that we can do it in patches and then slowly build and build. But yeah, unfortunately, I think it might be a bit of a tough afternoon for us.
All right. Well, we'll have once again an instant reaction podcast full time on Saturday. Matt, always a pleasure to talk to you. Look forward to it again in 7 days' time.
Awesome, mate.
Cheers.
The Roar